Welcome to Chapter 3 of the book, The Fourth Wall, Toward a Theology of the Ideal. In this chapter, Ariel takes our character on a trip to describe the nature of creation. Listen carefully as the nature of the story is philosophical. She explains that reality is more akin to a book, but a book that is written by God. Yes, this chapter takes a bit of your own imagination, but as you will see, that is the whole point. Thank you for coming on this journey. Please, as everyone says, like, subscribe, leave a message, and share.
Chapter 3. The Pirate Ship. Ariel led me back to the garden of trees in front of the library and opened the book, which hovered above her palms with a blue glow. She wondered aloud, "Let me imagine what you'd like to travel in as we move to the beginning." Then, thinking momentarily, she exclaimed, "I got it! Hold on to me!" I grasped her arm, and the mist of light arose once more, and when the mist soon resolved, we stood on a mighty pirate ship. And to my pleasant surprise, it creaked with every wave, and the mist of light filled the sails. I laughed and said, "A pirate ship? Really? What good story doesn't have pirates?" she said with a wink. The ship floated above a great ocean. There was no sky or land as far as I could tell, just the oscillations of waves under blackness. Upon each crest, a white light displayed so that the ocean seemed to sparkle, reminiscent of the fireflies that blinked in the countryside when I was young. Neither was there sound outside the ship's creaking, so our voices seemed to boom without competition. I wanted to whisper because of it. The Angel Ariel shone more radiantly here. She stood looking longingly at the waves holding onto the rail, her hair flowing in the wind of light that swirled around, hovering above the waters. She turned and looked at me. "So much nothing here but the beauty of potential and possibility. This is God's great canvas waiting to be painted with the touch of his hand," she told me. "In the beginning, the great artist set up his easel here. The canvas is unformed, disordered information that the grand artist will give function and form. It is nothing but possibilities." "So, this ocean is part of the metaphor?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "Those you left behind have started to grasp it, yet they fall short of comprehension. The critic continues to deceive them that there is a grand artist at all. They live within the painting, but do not see that it reveals an artist. Like your brother Peter wrote, for this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water." "What is this ocean really?" I asked with a shrug, still curious about the canvas's meaning. "Nothing," she replied bluntly. She sat down on a wooden barrel, and with a wave of her hand, an image appeared as if projected on an invisible screen. The image held a string of characters: LSMURREIRKPPTIETAHAI. Enthralled by the heavenly special effects, I moved closer and sat on a wooden box to watch, as did a few deckhands who leaned on their mop handles. She asked me to describe what I saw, so I replied, "A string of letters, gibberish." "Yes," she affirmed, "but it is still information, just with no understood meaning. It has only potential meaning, so therefore to you, it is nothing because it means nothing." Then, with another wave of her hand, the individual letters began to separate from the string and reassemble. "See this same set again," she instructed. The series of letters reordered into "Pirates like their rum," and I read it aloud with a grin of recognition. "Argmati," I heard from a pirate swabbing the deck behind the Angel. Laughing, she continued, "Even if it were readable, it would still be nothing until you read it. The act of reading brings the meaning to life. The story of a novel does not exist until it is readable and until someone reads it." At that moment, a tremendous thundercrack rattled our vessel. In the distance, off the starboard bow, I could see the light of a figure walking the water's surface, coming in our direction. A spotlight beamed overhead, illuminating each footstep amidst the ebb and flow of the canvas. Peals of thunder and sparks of electricity appeared to emanate from him as he moved. The deckhands stopped their work to watch the encroaching presence. However, Ariel remained undistracted, intent on finishing her thought. This ocean represents the canvas of creation. It is the raw thought, the raw information, from which God's imagination forms the appearances you experience. You see, your former reality is experienced because your consciousness was reading and being read like a book. I think I get it a little, but it is so vague and abstract, I replied. The idea that reality is more akin to a narrative in a book is counterintuitive, though. Are you saying matter is an illusion? Ariel crossed her arms and asked, between matter and mind, which is an inference and which is a given? I thought about the question momentarily as I rubbed my chin and replied, I think the mind is the given since I know I'm thinking already. Like, I think therefore I am. Matter is inferred from my experience as underlying what I experience. It is an explanation of what I see. That is correct, she said. Your mind is self-evident to you. Therefore, let's consider physical things and infer about their nature as you say. She reached into her pocket and presented an apple. She then asked me, is this apple mind or matter? It is obvious that it is matter, I answered. Is it? She said sardonically. What are the qualities of this apple? Well, it has a color, shape, weight, and smell. Yes, she added. It also has density, mass, and taste. She held the apple up. Taste and smell, be gone, she commanded. I grinned since I knew she knew I couldn't see any change. But the apple became transparent like glass when she commanded the color to go. Then she told the shape and weight to depart, and they vanished. The apple was gone entirely. Observe, she said. When you take away the ideas, you take away the object. Therefore, one could conclude that the apple is a configuration of ideas. Isn't that like mind? Assuming some unknown substance behind them isn't necessary. So which is a given now? I was dumbfounded. What about atoms? I answered with a question. The deeper you go in observing the appearances, the more like mind they become. Atoms are the smallest of appearances. At some point, what you observe as matter quits being merely small objects and starts being raw ideas. Only metaphors can describe them. I had no comment, just another question. What is reality, then? She waved her hand across her chest as if performing prestidigitation, and an image of a rope appeared before us. This rope represents the fundamental nature of all created reality, she said, keeping with the magician's manner and tone. It was as if she were saying, Ta-da! It all made me smile while some pirates were heard oohing nearby. Think of it as a thread in the fabric of reality, the ocean you see here. When the rope is straight and everything is flat, you experience nothing because all is the same. Nothing to read or notice. Another illustration is like the white background on a writing tablet. Nothing is there because it is uniformly the same. The difference presents itself when one writes a sentence on the writing tablet. Since the canvas represents only the potential for the story, nothing is experienced until the information is downloaded. The rope stands for information without meaning. It is the same in both directions. But when a disturbance occurs, that is noticeable. What is noticeable exists. Information is at the bottom of reality, but until it is organized and embedded with meaning, it makes no sense to say it exists. It remains mere potential. I was trying to grasp it. Of course, I knew that underneath my former reality must be a reality completely alien. Otherwise, it would merely be an extension of my experience in the first place. Something underneath must be immutable or necessary to avoid an infinite regress of causes. Therefore, it was unsurprising to me that the more profoundly scientists probe the universe, the more nonsensical it appears. At the bottom of reality, a counterintuitive world must create an intuitive one. I knew, therefore, that the best she could do was use symbols and metaphors. This world I engaged in was that metaphor. Eventually, after I spent some time here, I could comprehend that my life was a story, a work of art and imagination. It wasn't imagination in my mind alone, which would be a mere copy of something else, but in the mind of God. Some of you in the story would accuse me of describing solipsism, but that is not a necessary conclusion. No finite reason like mine has the breadth of power to imagine a world that can compete with God's story. The philosophical idealism you will learn from the heavenly host is a relational construct. Besides, we are captured in his story already. We have no room to write a new one as big. Regardless, I was learning about the immaterial then, and I have to say it was fascinating. At the bottom of all experience is information, or I should say, divine imagination. To make something from nothing is to disturb the rope. She touched the rope with her right forefinger, and the rope began to vibrate. This change makes it stand out and affects the rest of the fabric. It makes waves. So, in keeping with our metaphor, appearance makes waves on the canvas. The moment I tugged on the rope, I created a fundamental order that affects all potentialities that must relate to it. Finally, there is something that can be measured and therefore experienced. No longer was everything the same. Now there was a difference. But that difference occurred by agency, not a necessity. Moreover, how much energy, or information, I give the rope tug creates different types of waves. A big wave in the ocean looks and acts differently than small waves. You can see the difference. These differences are the appearances that make up the larger picture. It appears when an observer perceives the difference, or reads it. Think of this as information being noticeable. Your scientists are getting at this idea with their idea of the collapse of the wave function. A wave function collapse is nothing more than a sentence being read in a story. Nonetheless, each wave is but one brushstroke on the painting of your life. It is like the alphabet in the grand narrative. So we experience nothingness of uniformity. But the difference makes us experience, I asked. Yes, the grand artist supplies his instructions to the canvas. The instruction is pure math, a measure of and instruction for the difference. So yes, numbers are real in a way. Anyway, here we have many useful metaphors. Programming a computer, reading a book, or playing the strings on a guitar. When a computer programmer writes code, she creates an output meant to be experienced when the program is running. The reader of a novel experiences nothing until he or she begins to read, even though there are words on the page beforehand. The words on the page are mere potential until a conscious observer reads them and understands the meaning in context. Then, as if by magic, the images and the sounds appear. Its reality is not experienced directly from the page, but in the experience of the conscious reader. The information instructs the experience. Art creates life. When a classical guitarist plays, beautiful music is heard. Imagine living in the melody and rhythm, and the music is the totality of your reality. You do not experience the musician in this scenario, only the music, but you know a musician exists. So, it is with the grand story. As it is written, in him, we move and breathe and have our being. At that moment, the figure I saw walking on the water stood still amid the sea and its stillness. Like John's vision, he was dressed in a long garment with a golden sash. His eyes were a piercing fire, and his hair a perfect white. He looked bronze throughout, with a face brighter than the sun. With a thunderous voice, he said, "Let there be light." At that moment, heaven shone a light and spotlighted him and the ocean canvas. The mist of fog around the sea we saw hovering over the waters began to swirl around his feet, growing broader. As the breath of God widened, an unimaginably large stadium was revealed, and in each seat sat the angel band, each with an instrument. Some looked like what we knew, and some were unknown to me. Some angels looked like Ariel, who sang soprano, and others sang like those I heard at first, but all were in perfect harmony. Then, floating down from the spotlight above, came a scroll and gently landed at the feet of the figure, who I knew by now was Jesus, the first and the last. The scroll opened independently, and Jesus raised his hands to silence the chorus as the sea beneath his feet began to glow emerald green. Suddenly and decisively, the Lord started to conduct the host of heaven in the music of the spheres. As the angels sang together, and the music played with an impressive beat, the mist swirled around the stadium, picking up the heavenly sound and absorbing it. It was full of color, variegated with unknown colors pulsating with the rhythm of the celestial song. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen or heard. The swirls spiraled back to the feet of Jesus and into the emerald sea. The colors seemed to flow like water in a transparent tube in all its brilliance. Ariel nudged me from my trance and said, "Every story from God begins with an interlude of angels. No one will see this again until they sing, 'Glory to God in the highest,' when the author enters his own story and redeems it. He entered the grand narrative and wants to enter yours. One day, though, his penultimate story will end, and the sea will be like glass once more, giving rain to the final story where he will come again. He will sing blessings to the one seated on the throne of heaven. Your book is already stored with Razio, but no more books will be written one day. One day, the end will come." Then, she looked back at the epic scene. "The inventory?" She nodded affirmingly. Then, we watched together as the grand host of heaven finished their musical masterpiece, when what seemed like an explosion of color sent the ocean's waves in all directions, and then all went black. We were again at the book in the garden, Ariel by my side.